Hey Mom, in this video we're going to be looking at chapter 6, the normal distribution. And we're going to be looking at two parts for this chapter, standard normal distribution and then calculations involving that. And in this chapter you're going to recognize normal probability distributions and apply it, be able to recognize it and compare them to each other. So you might be asking, what is a normal probability distribution? And let me go full screen here. So here is our normal distribution, and this is a bell curve. This graph should be slightly smoother down here. And this is how grades used to be calculated. They would start with the majority of the students right in the middle getting C's, C pluses, or C's or C minuses. The top 2% would get an A. The bottom 2% get an F. And this was used in the 60s when schools were really competitive. We were in the Cold War, and we wanted students to really kind of fight with each other to get the highest grades. And so this created a really difficult system because only that top percent were able, only the top 2%. So in a class of 50, that's only one student getting an A. I think I said F, I meant an A. Hopefully you understood that. And so fighting for that A was, it just created a competitive environment. So, but it's also not very fair because, these B students, no matter how hard they worked, they were still stuck in the B situation. We can also look at the heights of women and men. And we can see here their height in inches and the frequency that this occurs. And this sample is a limited sample size of only about maybe 400 people. And you can see the women is roughly outlined with this shape, and the men is kind of a bad graph because you don't see the other men charts, but the men is going to be roughly outlined there. And so whenever things are growing, trees or animals, they tend to grow with these shapes. And here are the curves smoothed out. So you can see how the men are on average taller than women. And we can also tell that the women bar is taller, which means they're more clustered around their center. Men are a little more spread out. We'll talk about that in the future. So here we also have another example of IQ scores. And IQ scores are normally distributed around a mean of 100 and a standard deviation of 15. And so every year, when they administer these IQ tests, what they do is what's called norming the test, and they adjust the scores to fit this distribution. And so each year, the score, what's giving you a score of 100 might not be the same. But if you do score a 100, that means for that year, you were right on average. 50% of the participants were above you, and 50% of the participants scored below you. And if you score 115 on your IQ test, there would be 14 and 2 and 0.1. So about 16%, 16.1% of humans technically have a higher IQ than you, and about 84% are lower than you. And if you get way up here, 130, you're in the top, right around 98%. There's only about 2.1% of the people higher than you. And 145, you're in the 99.9 percentile. Only 1.1% are higher than you. And vice versa down here. So a few things to note. The average is right down the middle, so 100. The median is also right down the middle, 100, because this splits our data into 50% and 50%. The most common, the mode as well, is right down the middle because that's the highest, 100. And the standard deviations are going to be these little values. So from here to here, this has a standard deviation of this difference from 100 to 115. So the standard deviation on this curve is 15. We'll talk more about standard deviation in a bit. But that's an overall introduction to the normal distribution. They all have these bell-shaped curves, and this is going to show up in psychology, business, economics, sciences, nursing, and of course, mathematics. And here's the example of the IQ scores. But real estate prices also work. There's a lot of applications in the real world we'll be looking at. Okay, in the next video, we're going to talk about kind of some of these symbols and how to do some calculations. But for right now, we just want you to kind of get to know the shape, and you can kind of see the shape and know what we're going to be using a few parts of this shape for. All right, see you in the next video.